All right, week 14. This is digging a little more deeply into our roots in UI. And this will be UI design, it will be motion design. Um, it'll also be how well we use the tools, how well we know the tools that we have that we use for UI design, prototyping, and potentially how good we are at picking tools to do this work. Because this could be accomplished, this sort of like UI design, motion design, could be done in JavaScript or other animation libraries. It could be done in Figma, Framer, Proto.io, etc. There's just a lot of tools that can do this. And in many ways, it's the sophistication of what you're trying to communicate that may dictate what you use and what level of involvement is needed to make these things happen to the fidelity that you want them to. Because this week really does focus a lot on polish as well. So day one here is prototype a swipe interaction. So design a swipe interaction, make for a key task in a mobile app. The examples they have here, or we have here, I should say, is swipe to archive or delete, swipe to reveal actions, carousel type swiping. It could be approval, disapproval, but anything that you would use to swipe. And it could be something relatively novel. Maybe it's an app that connects two phones and you swipe to throw something to someone on another phone. Who knows? Um, but use it to expand where you need to, whether it's aiming for a type of work that you want to do, a company that you like to work for, or a type of app that you'd like to support. So just create the simple wireframe mockup. You use some of the smart animate prototyping tools to simulate the swipe behavior, but also it'd be a good idea to go back and annotate what the intended behavior is and what the user sees at each stage that communicates what's going on. Some of the challenges with this particular design challenge is that it may be hard to prototype in the software, but do what you can, and if you can, try to pick a piece of software that supports you in doing this. So maybe something like Play would help you have a realistic projection on your device such that you could truly animate this and have it interactive. But or Swift, the native iOS development language in their prototyping abilities may allow you to do this. Uh, but yeah, do your best to make that work. Day two, design a hover animation for a product card. So, and this could be for a product card. It could be for really any card, but just make an interesting hover effect. Make something that you think will be effective. Consider the tone. Consider the voice of the brand that you're trying to support. Consider the design system that you are working within, or if you're creating something for yourself, maybe it's for your portfolio, maybe you're heading toward an industry and you need something that's more vibrant and playful, or something that's more subtle and sleek. Just consider all those things when you're designing this. But a hover effect something can zoom in, zoom out, or it could recess or elevate above the surface. It could glow. It could have things fade in, fade out. Buttons could appear. But there are just a number of things that you could do to show that something is interactive and begin to communicate how you might interact with that. So create the default and hover states, and document what would happen in those hover states. So not only have the prototype do the thing that you're hoping it would do, but also take screen caps and point out the subtlety of it and point out the interaction points and make it clear what is changing from one card to the next to help people who may have to consume and understand what's going on. This could be a lot of fun, depending on what you're hoping to approach. And again, this may be a good opportunity to show people your how you can align this sort of interaction with their organization, their product, their brand, or also just build something fun for your portfolio. Day 3, create a loading animation for a data-heavy page. In this case, it'd be good to think a lot about what happened just prior to this needing to load this data-heavy page and what's going to present on the screen afterwards, what sort of processing hypothetically is happening in the background, how much you could potentially communicate about that. So once you have those first 2 or 3 questions answered, go talk to someone. If you don't know what might happen, maybe a developer, and say, hey, what actually does happen, and what sort of things could I communicate, and what are the things that may prevent me from having access to that information or enable it? Does this seem feasible? And when they give you that input, then use it to consider how much you might want to communicate to the end user to help set their expectations. But choose that concept, build the animation, and maybe choose a fallback state. There are some things that can happen when loading on a data-heavy page. Some of it is failure. Some of it's a timeout is reached and the client no longer has connection with the server. Some of it is that you ran into a hang-up. If you don't have access to the progress that's happening on the server side, it may mean that you need to put something like a fallback state in that says, we're still working. But one way or another, consider the entire flow, all the things that could go wrong, and think about the states that you could produce to help communicate what's going on to the user so that they don't abandon the interaction and they get what they want, but they also understand the nature of what's happening on the background such that their expectations are set so they know how long to wait, and not just sit there if it's broken, waiting for an hour for something to load that never will. Day 4, design a drag and drop interface for file uploads. Again, back to the drag and drop concern, find something a tool that may work for you to build this out. Otherwise, create the annotations and think about how you might communicate drag and drop to your team. Some of the examples are dragging a file to a box, dragging to reorder list, or dragging into specific categories. Mock up those states and annotate them well. Add any sort of micro interactions. You can add those as animations. You could potentially build a panel in your prototype that shows all the different animations. And use motion to confirm success or guide correction. So this will be a tough one. There are a lot of complex things happening in this, because there may be you sort of have to communicate where a landing zone is, where people could drag from, what happens when you hover over something that you could drag, what happens when you hover over a target area, what happens when you release, what happens in the process as it's processing whatever you've dropped, and then a confirmation state. So there's a lot happening in that flow. So it may be good to map out, after you understand your concept, map out all of the little things that could happen between point A and point B. So when the user initially thinking to drag and drop something to when the system confirms it, and then do your best to build that prototype, communicate all the interactions and animations and responses, and then annotate those. This one could be fairly big, but what I would encourage you to do is, and this is tough, is to stay focused on the heart of this challenge while you're doing it and not get lost in some of the ancillary stuff like additional polish in visual design, because the foundation of this could take your full hour and a half on day 4. And then day 5, Add transitions between screens for flow. So pick 2 to 3 app screens and simulate a real task flow. So this is moving from a dashboard to detail view, transitioning from an upload to a success screen. This could be depositing a check. So saying you're going to deposit a check, depositing a check, and then having the check deposit confirmed. There are a number of different linear flows you could use. So communicate as much as you can about this particular flow. So there may be animation aspects or transition aspects that allow you to have interstitials. So maybe that loading screen pops in here, and after you complete one thing, the system's processing it, and then it goes to the next point where the user needs to interact with it. Use visual hierarchy to let people know or to help communicate how information is structured. So if you're going from a master to a detail view, what does that look like from right to left, top to bottom? When you're popping back out from the detail view to the master, what does that look like? Is there a way through motion to communicate visual hierarchy or to communicate hierarchy? And then annotate. So with your different screens, annotate what's going on. So try to clearly communicate everything that's going on, why it's going on. Relatively straightforward in terms of building this out and sort of matching the pattern of the rest of the challenges this week. But the one interesting thing I think to consider here is how you do transition from a full screen to a full screen. Where are there interstitials, and how do you help people know at what level of the app they're in through animation, directional swipes, directional navigation, and any additional elements on the screen that communicate hierarchy. So day 5, this is fairly advanced in terms of UI. Week 14, day 5, week 14, 1 through 5, fairly advanced in terms of UI. Should be a lot of fun. If you love UI, should be a challenge. If you're not in that space, but definitely give you some empathy for your UI designers. Either way, you should come out with some interesting things for your portfolio, if not as your portfolio. And wish you the best of luck. Make sure to speak up if you have any challenges. We'll do your best to help.